Today is how to have the ultimate career as a riding instructor with Brian Wee and Nikki Hall. Still got some people trickling in. Is anyone on my team on this call? I don't think so.
I'm here, Meg.
Meg. Oh, amazing. Meg, can I make you the host?
Sure.
See if and then that way you can let people in when they come in and I can focus on presentation. See if it will still allow me to share the presentation. Awesome. So we've got 71 people on right now. And I think that's enough for us to get started. It's 1:04. So anyone who stays until the end of the presentation will get the slides. And just the quick 2 cents about Next Level Horse Businesses and what we do is we are a company that is focused on helping horseback riding schools become as profitable as possible. And we are consultants that work with our clients one-on-one. We've now worked with over 1,000 riding schools, and we get better. We've been doing it for about 6 years, and we've built a team of coaches. And every month that goes by, I think we get better and we learn something. So I like to have regular webinars where we kind of showcase some of what the new things that we've learned. I'd say some of our success stories is, our probably default goal is to help people at least make $10,000 per month in profit. And not only that, but to learn how to build a team. So you're making $10,000 a month at least. We have clients that do 20, 30,000 a month from their riding school and profit, but with a team. So you're not teaching every lesson, cleaning every stall, responding to every email. You are able to afford quality people that help you and still be profitable. And it's something that we love designing. Now, why do we like designing this? And we talked about it in my team meeting today, as well as I asked the question in a group. And my team is super fired up to 72. Miranda's got somebody on her phone. So my team is super fired up to do this. And I was asking them why, right? Because you can work for any company. Why is it so fun to help riding schools become more profitable, or why is it important? And one, for me, honestly, I just like helping riding instructors support their own family financially and with time. For example, I have a client who used to kind of be a slave to their business, and we help them, get more clients, raise their pricing, lower their expenses, and build a team. And now she travels a lot because her kids are doing exciting things. And I love to hear for her, not just that she has money in her bank account, but she tells me that she went to Ireland and groomed for her daughter, because her daughter is a really good rider. You know how it is when you're the daughter of a trainer, right? These second generation horse people are always really good. So there's only third and fourth generation. So she's a really elite rider, and she used to just sort of tell her daughter, well, tell me how it goes. And this time she got to groom for her daughter. Like, those sorts of things really fire me up. We have another client who said if she could just add $7,000 a month to her business, that her husband could come home, because he works on an oil rig and they've got small kids, and her husband is missing out on basically being with the family. He's just on an oil rig. And so she did that, and they're already making plans. She's added about 5,000 a month. I talked to her yesterday, since she started working with us about 3 months ago. And now he is starting to make plans to come home more part-time and be a father. So that kind of stuff, for whatever reason, always fires me up. And, but the rest of my team, we also talked about, look, when you have a riding school that's running well, basically what you're doing, and riding school we should define as it has a lesson on lesson horse component. It doesn't have to be 100% lesson on lesson horses, but what you're really doing is helping create people who can help us take care of horses and take better care of horses. You're educating them how to be better with horses. And I think we have 7 million horses. We're excited. We have worked with the American Horse Council recently, and they have a new study that should be out any day now. And Meg, if you can mute everybody, please. So, except for me, it could be tough. So, thank you. So, another benefit is you help us create people to take care of horses. So I think that it's really good for horses what you guys are doing, especially the lesson on lesson horse people. They go on to buy horses, and if you do your job right, they're helping us take good care of them. Jennifer Williams on my team said she just loves the human transformation component. Like, she has a riding school and she loves seeing the kids become more emotionally developed and more responsible, more empathetic. She likes to see basically her students develop into wonderful little people. Like, that's what she loves to do. That's kind of what fires her up. It also is really good for the entire horse economy. That's something that I think about, that the entire horse economy needs to take its hat off to the people who are working with complete beginners, because these are the people that you bring in that have no horse background, and you turn them into horse people. And then for the rest of their horse career, they're often buying horses from horse dealers, buying horse trailers from horse trailer people, buying bridles from tack stores, going to horse shows, supporting the horse show organizer, and on and on and on. So it's good for the whole economy, what we're doing. Now, obviously the reverse is true. If you fail, then that's not good for the whole economy. And what Megan was saying, a lot of what we do now that we've supported these riding schools, is there is a phenomenon that riding horses is becoming something that only ultra high net worth people are able to do, which is kind of crazy, because historically everybody had a horse right before cars. It wasn't that long ago that everybody had a horse. And the truth is, after working with a lot of people, I realized that there are a lot of dirt poor people that still own horses. That's been my experience. So I don't think it's true that you need to be really, really wealthy to own horses. And I think putting forward that model, Megan appreciated that. She felt like she is widening the base, so that's not just the ultra wealthy that are into horses because of this work we do. So what we're all doing here has a lot of, I think it is important to understand what is your inspiration. So that's some of the inspiration for me. I just like hearing the stories of is probably the number one thing. I appreciate all these things too. So the journey of the riding school, or of the riding instructor, is we really feel like the base should be lessons on lesson horses. And we've developed a model, and I'll get into it at the end, where I've got some hypothetical numbers where you make $200,000 a year in profit. And I'll break down those numbers for you quickly. But the foundation of it is lessons on lesson horses. And the reason for that is because of the target audience size from a financial perspective. So one of the most important things when you start a business is, well, probably the most important thing is clients. You need clients, right? And so when anybody is looking to sell something, anything, right? That's what you do in a business. You have to sell something. You want to know, okay, how big is the target market audience? You want to know everything about it. But the big two things, like, how big is the audience? Do they have any extra money? And how hungry are they for your service, right? So a lot of times people don't think through that. between these two different services. Okay. Service number one, you own a lesson horse and your advertisement is like, hey, would you like to learn how to ride a horse? Okay. That target audience is basically every human being that isn't totally paralyzed, that has some, I mean, a lot of people ride until they're like 80. It's literally every human being. Okay. It's huge. It's bottomless. And so that's why it's so fun to have, if your business is a little quiet, then, and you're not doing that, like you should at least have one lesson horse and run those ads, because it's like, at least the phone starts ringing. In fact, we have a client ran some ads, got some phone numbers. People like, hey, I'm interested. Here's my number. Call me. And she picked up the phone and she misdialed. She called a random phone number. It was in her area. And she said, hey, it's Lindsay. I'm calling about horseback riding lessons. And they're like, yep, wrong number. Never, don't know who you are. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And they're like, wait. Horseback riding lessons? Like, tell me more. And so anyways, she signed up this random person that she misdialed. And it's because literally everyone can be convinced to come take a riding lesson. Now, the problem is that most people are like, forget that. I'm going to work with hunter jumper riders that already know how to post the trot, already know basically like, have like 5, 6, 7, 8+ years of experience and really want to learn like the finer parts of riding and go to shows. That's who I want to work with. I'll let somebody else do the beginners. The problem is that I don't think, because I've talked to a lot of people, thousands, and I don't think they've thought through how much smaller that target market audience is within their area. It's going from, I'll give you some numbers, like in my area right here, because we can pull from, Baltimore and Washington, D.C. I'm in Maryland. I'd say, I'm going to just guess, there's about 600,000 people that I could potentially get as a client in a lesson on lesson horse program. In terms of actual horse owners that want to board here and do upper level nuanced riding any caliber, and who, first of all, you look at like how many people are horse owners, not very many. Of the horse owners, how many of them are close to you? And then of those, how many of them are in your discipline, in your niche? And then of those, how many are unhappy where they're at currently? And sometimes you're talking about like a handful of people that already know you. And you hire somebody like, hey, help me market to them. Like, there's like 5 people and they already know you. And, you walked by them one day and didn't say hi and they'll never forget it, So that's like where a lot of people's businesses is right there, like this microscopic audience. So we like to create our own horse owners. That's a huge thing. And I'll get into you with like the pricing and the marketing and how we do that and what the model looks like. Now, after you have a solid base, and I'm not saying you shouldn't offer boarding and do the show barn thing, but after you have that solid base in place, and then you clone yourself and you have a team that is starting to service everybody, it frees you up to do online courses and game-changing innovations. Now, I like, for a lot of times, riding instructors will abandon a deeply broken physical business to go chase online courses and game-changing innovations because they think that it's just not possible to be good with a physical business. And so I used to think that way until we started really looking really hard at making the physical business better. And then we decided it's kind of gross to just have this mess of a physical business and then go create an online course or try to create an app or create some technology. So a great example is Maggie Clancy. She's going to be speaking at my live event along with, I'll get you the names of everybody that's speaking, hopefully, or if you can find that image and put it in the chat. It is It's in the Next Level Horse Businesses Facebook group. And when we started working with her, she wasn't quite sure what to do. She had a normal riding school, and she was really a kind of a show barn. And we just had her beef up. I'm not saying throw away the show barn, but we had her really beef up the lesson on lesson horses and the camps and button up the pricing. You don't want to give this away. Stronger terms and conditions, better software, better marketing, and really ramp that up and built a team. And the other benefit of lesson on lesson horses is that the clients are less sensitive about who teaches them, whereas that show client, they want your pretty face all day, every day. And they're not going to accept riding with your assistant, maybe once in a while, but not for long. But with the lesson on lesson horse piece, it's much easier to have your assistant show up and teach the lessons and have the clients accept it. It's way easier. So she did all that, and she actually decided to really lean into that and started to lean away from the show barn. That was like one of the big things that Maggie did. And she grew her business to be over $1 million in sales, very good profit margins, I'd say 30% plus. And, it's been great. And then she's done a good job of having a team, and it allowed her to build an app. And I'll put the app in the chat. And it's somebody who we've worked with for a long time. And Maggie will be speaking at World Equestrian Center Ocala, and you can hear her whole story. But you guys should download her app. So she's somebody that followed this model. She's got $1 million, keeps maybe 30% of it every year. Great client diversification, lessons on lesson horses. She does boarding. They do shows. It's a very healthy business. And what's crazy is that as your business gets bigger, she actually has more time, which is kind of crazy, because we meet a lot of people who have these little tiny microscopic businesses and are somehow always tell us that they have no time, versus you start meeting people that have big businesses and they've got time, right? And it's through a combination of technology and a team. And so we'll get into that. Yeah, can you find a link to the download of OnBar? So OnBar is a app that will help you buy and sell horses. It was sort of inspired by Tinder. Like, you can swipe left and swipe right on horses that you like and don't like, and save them. It's a great app, and everybody needs to get it. It's called OnBar. And Meg, maybe you can put it in the chat. Now, I just want to stop. Is this making sense to you guys so far? Am I going too fast? Is this helpful? If you can just put in the chat. So I want to get into kind of the foundation that it needs to be done a very specific way. And let's get into what that is. So the different elements here, and I want to make sure I save a lot of time for Nikki Hall. So Nikki Hall wrote Horse Sense Learning Levels, which is a really great curriculum to have inside of your riding school. I've found that most riding schools don't have a curriculum, like a documented curriculum with levels, with lesson plans. So all the riding instructors are on the same page. And the benefits of a curriculum are the same as the benefits of having a recipe in a restaurant, okay? And the reverse is true. So most restaurants know that they have to write down their recipe before they hire a chef. And what most riding instructors do, if they owned a restaurant, is they would literally hire somebody and just complain that their pizza doesn't taste good and they never learned how to cook. They literally haven't given their assistant a recipe. So there's a ton of benefits to it. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to pass this piece here to Nikki and let her get into, that's her life's work, is perfecting the curriculum in a riding school. I'm going to quickly go through these other 5 components and give you the $200,000 a year profit business plan. And let's quickly go through facility. And there's a lot of options here. You can rent, you can own, you can dry lease, you can rent bedded stalls. And the conclusion we've come to is this is a personal decision and there's not a right or wrong answer. Renting bedded stalls is actually a really easy way to start. And while I do believe that real estate is an important part of your personal financial health, owning the business you operate out of does not need to be a part of that. A lot of people rent the business they operate out of, and then they might own their private house and they might own investment property. So in the horse world, a lot of people will tell you you have to own your facility. That's so important for your business. And I think that there's definitely some truth to that. But I think that the truth to that is because people are not driving the correct deal when they rent in some fashion. So we had a really interesting presentation at our last live event with a restaurateur. And I think that a restaurant is a lot like a riding school because they're physical businesses that have to secure a good location. And that's going to be like their biggest expense. And then food is their other biggest expense. And then labor is their other biggest expense. And then they have to get local people to show up. And so he was saying he would never start a restaurant unless he had a 10-year lease with an option to renew for another 10. Because he's like, I need that. And I've never heard of a riding instructor get anywhere near a long enough lease. They're always like month to month. And then a lot of times we've helped people build these, pretty rock solid businesses. And then the landlord says, hey, I changed my mind, like get out of here. And you'll meet all these riding instructors that bounce from place to place. And then they'll say, oh, I have to own my own place. That's the only way to get long-term stability. So I would just say, like, maybe you could get a better lease too. Like if you had a lease that couldn't just be ripped out from under you, a lot of times that's going to equal a lot more profit because you should be able to lease something and then you don't have to dump your money into the property the way the owner does. And you should be more profitable from that business. So there's a ton of different ways to get a facility. We got people that start these businesses with no money. Okay. So if you're just getting started, you don't need money. A lot of people will just go to a existing facility. Like I have a client that went to an existing facility and it was like a woman who had these ponies and just, you find these places everywhere. It's not advertised, but she found it. And she's like, let's partner and I'll whip this place into shape. She hired us. We got her a ton of clients. We priced it right. And yeah, she makes over 10,000 a month. She didn't come up with any money. So you can get started without any money. And, getting into services that you decide to offer. I know I've hammered home that, lesson on lesson horses and horse ownership are good services to offer here. And let me pause for this question here. Paul is asking, do you know of any financiers who have bought and leased out facilities? I mean, I guess I need more information on that question. Like a private equity group or something, or I mean, people do it all the time in terms of people buy facilities and rent them all the time. So for a rent to own, yeah, rent to own happens all the time. If that's what you mean, rent to own happens all the time. That's a great way to acquire a property. Maggie Clancy struck up a lease to own with her property that she has in Petaluma. So if we get into services for, that you can offer here, when we, I think that a good business can generate, approximately half of its profit from the lesson on lesson horses and half of it from horse ownership. And I'll show you a hypothetical business plan in a moment here. One thing here to help you, and Nikki Hall can help you with this too, is that monetizing unmounted content is a game changer, because ultimately your price per lesson has to come up dramatically for this to work. And a lot of people, like, that's just, at the end of the day, they just aren't able to get enough. And raising your prices is probably one of the core things we do best, is help people build a better offer, right? The offer is, well, how much does it cost? What are the terms and conditions? And what do I get? And you got to be sophisticated here and nuanced with all of that. Most people I talk to are like, well, $50 a lesson. It's 65 if it's a private. And like, that's all they have. And then when we tell them, like, you need to raise your prices, they're just like, all right, it's 55 for a group and 75 for a private. And so what we've moved towards is more tuition-based pricing with minimum commitments. Some of our clients have annual commitments, and like, I'm like, great, that's what you need, right? And now it's like $400 a month, and it's a membership. And what else can we throw in there to make it worth it besides lessons? Because lessons are extremely expensive to deliver. You need the instructor, you need the horse. The horse can only teach so many lessons. So we can't just throw them in there like candy, but we got to get more for that monthly membership. So one of the strategies is, hey, look, you get access to group content around horses, not necessarily on the horse's back. So that umbrella of services is huge, right? It could be unmounted horsemanship exercises. Nikki Hall can give you like bottomless lesson plans for the unmounted section. And then when you throw that in there, what we have found is the market will value it. And now their kid can come out 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe not every time they come out they're riding, but they are paying a lot more per month than they were. And you are delivering more, but delivering a group unmounted class is a lot less expensive. So an example would be a business that used to charge $50 a lesson with no commitment, okay? And they work with us and we say, okay, your new price point is $350 per month. And the client gets 1 lesson per week and 1 unmounted class per week, okay? And they pay that whether or not they show up, and they can't cancel, for 3 months minimum. So the client that used to, in the old world, would only pay them $200 a month is now paying them $350 a month. So that's almost double. And we have a whole strategy to get that book of business. Like, you don't want to just announce tomorrow that you're doubling your minimum revenue commitment. There's definitely a strategy to get that done, but getting it done is it doubles your business. And so that's one thing I just want to say. And then the pricing terms and conditions, it needs to be like access to your program for $350 per month. And if the client flakes out, if the client, wants to cancel, it needs to be tough to do that. And I want you guys to start being little Karens to legitimate businesses. Actually, I don't know if I should be saying that, but I want you guys to notice if other businesses have more boundaries than maybe you do as a riding school, or maybe that you see as industry standard, right? Like, I signed up for something and then I'm like, hey, I just changed my mind, I want to quit. And they email me back like, oh, I'm so sorry, but no, right? You're locked in for a year. And so riding schools need to start to learn to do that. And so the terms and conditions are almost more important than the price. And we always bump things up, minimum of a quarterly commitment. Ideally, you start locking people in annually. And again, there's lots of different strategies to do that. But what I want the takeaway from today to be is you got to start doing that. And that's when your business starts to get better and better and better. Any questions so far? Is this making sense to you guys? Do you see how that could change your business by making those types of changes? I also want to talk about some other methods of developing this clientele, and then I'll hit on the software that helps and the team strategies that we implement, and then I'll hand it over to Nikki. So, so again, is this helpful? Are you guys following along? Any specific questions? So developing clientele encompasses it encompasses bringing in new clients and a few other things. We used to just talk about getting clients. Everyone's like, how do I get clients? How do I get more clients? How do I get more clients? And you want to be advertising, right? And you want to spell out that client journey. We talk about dating a lot as an analogy, right? Where ultimately, let's say your goal is to get married, right? You might be like, all right, well, let's just see if we can start a conversation, right? Let's just see if we can get a phone number. Let's just see if we can get, drinks. Then let's see if we can get a meal together, right? It's like this whole thing of a series of escalating commitments. And so you need to do that. And the first commitment is usually an introductory lesson, a single introductory lesson. And that's where it starts. And we market that heavily with Facebook and Google ads, open houses. And at the end of the open house, we ask people to sign up for just a single intro lesson. And you should be partnered with your local Parks and Rec if you have one in your area that's open to partnering, and be in their catalog. And a lot of times Parks and Rec, they want to run programs as if they're their own, but through your business. So they will collect the money, enroll people, and you can do like a weekend camp with them. And they'll split the money with you in some fashion, 50-50, 80-20, whatever you negotiate. It's not so much the camp that you're looking to benefit from. It's after the camp, you want to kind of keep those people long-term 100% yours. So that's another opportunity. But what I've learned is we've gotten really, really good in some cases of getting people, 5-10 new clients a month with properly structured Facebook ads, let's just say. However, what the businesses that really crush it, they're not just getting 5-10 new people a month from Facebook ads. They also are keeping those people longer than the other businesses. That's, a penny retained is a penny earned. And I'm going to talk about strategies for that. But they're also getting referrals from those people, and they're upgrading those people into better programs, right? Into twice a week, 3 times a week, versus the inferior business is churning. And then they're just like, bring me more ads, bring me more new people. And that's gross. It's just like a bucket with a hole in it. And they're just trying to put water in it instead of patching the hole. And, better yet, it's like if the client brings a friend and they both upgrade, that's way better than, the client that churns. That's night and day. Then when you turn the ads on and you bring in new people, I mean, these things fill up quick, right? So that's the model for developing clientele. Any questions on that? And we've got some questions rolling in here. So Chris says, those changes seem very corporate in nature. Does it turn people off who are used to a more handshake, old-fashioned values type of culture? Interesting. Does it turn some people off? Maybe it does. I don't know. It doesn't work. The handshake business doesn't really scale and work that well, because what ends up happening is somebody ends up being a Karen. It's an if, it's a when, not an if situation. And that's where I like to pull out my agreement and talk about what they agreed to. So I would say that's a really interesting thing that you brought up, and we could kind of flush that out more. A lot of times what I found is we give people the answer to a rock solid, profitable horse business on a platter, and they have some weird reason why they can't accept it, right? And I even hired a mindset coach in my program who works with people, because I'm like, So walk me through once again, because the person might, and look, Chris, I'm not saying that you have this problem, but person might be like, yeah, my business is in tatters. It's terrible. It's ruining my life. Can't support my family. My horses, I can't even feed. My bills are late. You're like, all right, here's a solution on a silver paddle. We're going to lock people in to stronger agreements. And then they're like, well, that'll turn people off. You're like, what do you mean? You know, like we have hundreds of clients that lock people into these types of deals, and it's better for the clients, but people just won't do it. They're like, some people. So I would look into what that's all about. But it's interesting that you said that. Nancy says, mine cancel at last minute. And I told them I have to pay. Does your model charge for the intro lesson? Yes, it does. Carrie Meyer, what is the benefit of doing monthly versus seasonal? Therapeutic riding programs in my area often have a 12-week session that people enroll in. And how are these models perceived differently? So I like to have I like the minimum commitment of, like a 3-month minimum commitment, but I don't like having to go back to my clients every 3 months and get them to re-enroll. So often what I set up is a monthly charge indefinitely. And I say there's only 4 exit points of the year. And if you don't cancel before a certain time, you're automatically re-enrolled into the next semester. So from my standpoint, once I enroll somebody, I don't do anything except upgrade them maybe. And I don't have to go back to my entire book of business and get them to all sign up for new quarter, because you have to do a certain amount of volume. And I need to change the industry's standards for what is volume. And I want to talk about that too, and show you what you got to be able to do. So I like semesters, but I don't want to go back and re-enroll everybody. Where do professionals who focus on training horses fit into the model? Someone has to train all these horses, all the young horses and horses that need education to even enter a riding school. Great question. So horse training is something that you might do when you have 10,000 a month, let's say, in profit because the easiest business model and the one that has the most advantages is a fully delegated horseback riding school. And the one that has probably the most disadvantages might be taking horses in on training. The ones that do like, hey, I'll put 30, 60, 90 days on your horse. That model is from just a business standpoint is really bad. So what you might do is after you have that's where we're like, okay, so a lot of times the answer is having $10,000 a month from a profitable riding school, well delegated, and you have your time back. And then you might have 2 horses in training because that's what you love to do. And it's a little bit of extra money, but it's not going to be a great decision if your goal is to be financially successful, is my experience of that. So I want to keep moving forward just because I want to make sure there's time for Nikki. And some of the most important things that a software needs to do is automate billing. So no more invoicing. Okay. We don't invoice and hope we get paid. We make deals that are like, it's $350 per month indefinitely. And we set up that so that it automatically swipes and we don't have to do anything unless it doesn't go through. I also want automated reminders, right? Like in order to get 150 people to show up today, right? Do you think I had some software? Do you think that I was on my phone sending you guys all those texts and emails? Or do you think I used some technology, right? Also, websites are really important, how you build all that. One thing that's really important is the communication channel of your riding school needs to be off of your personal cell phone. So we set up real business phone numbers. We set up, our proprietary software is Impulsion.io. It does all this. It does online signatures. These are sort of like the 5 core things it does. And it gets all of it off of your personal cell phone so that you can have an assistant, managing and looking at all these communications, and you no longer have to do that. That's really big, right? So I have assistants that are monitoring all these communications, right? When you guys respond to my text, it's going to be somebody from my team that's going to look at all that so that I don't have to get, right. It's allow me to grow my business much bigger. And I can really think about the content of what I want my clients to go through rather than be inundated with, emails and scheduling. So quickly want to talk about building a team and then hand it over to Nikki. So when it comes to, and Mary, are you here, Mary? Is Mary Gubish here? Meg, can you see if Mary's here? Did she make it? Maybe, maybe not. I'm scrolling through. Maybe not. She would have piped up. So I'm just curious because that's one of my writing instructors. But what we currently recommend in terms of writing instructors is a deep pool of part-time people or truly structuring an apprenticeship with somebody where you tell them that you'll teach them everything they know, and you'll teach them the business, and you'll sort of support them to some degree in starting their own business, provided it's 50 miles away or more. Because the big mistake is a lot of times you bring somebody in and then they start a business down the street after you've introduced them as an expert to all your clients and trusted them and taught them everything you know. And so we like to really have conversations with people early on and say, look, is this just sort of a part-time thing? Because it's not, the way I look at it is being a writing instructor for somebody else, his program is not really a long-term career. And so you either need like a lot of people that are kind of part-time and transient and know that there's going to be high turnover, or if you're going to get somebody that ultimately wants to do this, then a lot of times we're like, well, then you're going to probably need to own your own writing school someday. That's where the financial payoff is. And that's fine, but let's just be really clear about when you're going to start it and where you're going to start it, and I'll support you, as opposed to we're just finding that writing instructors are not having that conversation, and then they're all being, blindsided when now we see this is super predictable. You just ask somebody, do you want to own your own? Great. Well, let's clarify that. You work for me for 2 years, and I will help you set up your own writing school. I'll help you with the marketing. I'll help you negotiate the lease. I'll help you find lesson horses. I'll mentor you, and we'll be best friends. And I want you to be successful. But let's not set it up right next to mine, because can you see how that wouldn't be fun? Because it's more fun to be friends. So the other couple things I'll say about your team is that we also negotiate in the deal that the riding school is closed 6 weeks a year and let your lesson horses rest. And we've also started recommending that people sell, take a look at when you buy your horse and you pick, is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? But after a certain years, and I would say the default should be after 2 years of service, you should list that lesson horse for sale, and, either sell it in the barn, because guess what? When everybody's favorite lesson horse, and it shouldn't be like, I'm going to pick and choose who's for sale. It's like after 2 years of service, you get listed for sale, I think, as a standard operating procedure. And don't reward that lesson horse, that great lesson horse, with having to be a lesson horse forever. That's one reason why we do that. Another reason is you should be making money. A riding school should be able to buy wholesale, sell retail, just the way that any business does. So you should make significant money by doing this. The third reason is if you don't do this, you are guaranteed to end up with a herd of unusable old horses that will take the business down. And so, but all you have to do is be thoughtful about implementing a strategy like this and making sure you buy horses that have, and not every horse is going to work out, but that's a very important little, side note to do. So the business model, really quick, is, if you had 20 stalls and 2 arenas, I would say get yourself 10 lesson horses 2 personal horses, 8 horses in full training, and you do 100 lessons a week on 10 lesson horses with this schedule, maybe. Okay, your weekly schedule looks a little something like this. Combination of 30-minute privates and group lessons of 4, maybe, when you're mature. And your expenses are gonna fluctuate, but it's almost like 2 businesses. You might spend $9,000 a month on fixed expenses. You might spend another $5,000 a month feeding and shoeing the 10 lesson horses on top of the fixed expenses, depending on how you run your business. And you might get a stall cleaner for $4,000 a month. You might pay your riding instructors $4,000 a month, and you might pay a customer support person $2,000 a month, roughly. That's going to be about 23,000. Now, if you get $350 a month per lesson per week, you still profit about 11,000, 12,000 a month, and that's with everything delegated. Like that hypothetical is everything delegated. Now, look, the first thing we do if we decide to work with you is build out, your pricing and your expenses and manage it on paper. So don't get too hung up if your numbers, if your rent is higher or lower, right? So, but the other beauty is now the lesson on lesson horse program is kind of paid for all the fixed expenses, and here we just spend another, let's see here, we spend another $1,800 on 8 horses that are boarded. So just, feeding 8 horses that are boarded, we might spend $1,800, assuming that we've already rented the place. We might pick up another stall cleaner just for those 8 horses at $4,300, and therefore your total expenses would be about $6,100 on the horse ownership side. You might get 8 people that pay you $1,500 a month, and this might be what you do with your time. And like maybe this is where you do horse training. Maybe you charge $1,500 a month to train 8 horses, and that's what you do on top. And so you'll generate another $12,000 a month in revenue, of which about half will be profit. So put together side by side, 8 horses in full training, 10 lesson horses teaching 100 lessons a week. That's only working 8 hours a week per lesson horse, and they get 6 weeks off. And after 2 years of service, you sell them. So it's not abuse, in my opinion. Like some people are like, that's crazy. I'm like, nah, it's not. And we go for young kids. Like a lot of this is like lead line lesson. The total profit in this model is about 17,000. It's about 210,000 a year, and that's what a nice little well-run riding school should be cranking out. And that's what we see them do when everything is perfect. You got to run a tight ship from A to Z. So one quick thing is, if you guys want, we're having this live event. Meg put the speakers in. You can get 50% off if you're on this webinar. It's only $250 to come to World Equestrian Center and get access to it. It's normally $500. And if you can't make it in person, we'll get you the recording. And the other thing is, if you want to sit down with our team and really map out what your expenses are and really what your pricing is currently and what the tweaks we would make to it, we'll give you that free consultation. And me or somebody from my team can meet with you and sort of show you, because a lot of times you can't smell yourself, meaning we now can look at your business and show you a couple tweaks that would make it sing, usually within 20-30 minutes of really looking into it. So if that's what you want, I really appreciate your time. That is the most valuable thing you guys could give me. And so, I wanted to give you a little bit of something extra here. As promised, I will give you the slides because you made it this far too. And with that, Meg, if you want to hand it You will get the recording if you buy it's only $250. You get all those topics. So if you want Meg to hand it over to Nikki, or at least take her off mute, I'd love to introduce Nikki Hall and make sure you guys get to hear her curriculum presentation. And in the chat are the notes. Nikki, are you there off mute?
I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Absolutely, yeah. So guys,
right.
thank you for tuning in. This is Nikki Hall. She wrote Horse Sense Learning Levels. It's an amazing curriculum.
Hi, everybody. As Brian mentioned, my name is Nikki Hall. I am the creator and co-owner of Horse Sense Learning Levels. And I'm so excited to come talk shop with you all today. Pretty much all you need to know about me is that when I was 9 years old, I was writing camp curriculum and lesson plans for my friends and their imaginary horses. And we had horse shows and structured riding lessons in my front yard and scared the neighbors a little bit. So later on, I joined Pony Club and found out that if you are a little nerdy about education, that can pair really well with a love of horses. As of this year, I have been teaching lessons more or less full time for 20 years now, which makes me feel very old. And from 2004 to 2018, my mother and I teamed up to ride a full-scale riding school. We had lessons, we had an unmounted program, we had summer camps, show team, cooperative boarding, the works. I'm going to go ahead and pull up some slides here, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how our journey started, where that business ended up, and why the Learning Levels curriculum became a game changer and actually changed the course of my life and several other people's lives along with it. So let me get my screen sharing going here today. Fun. All righty. Let me make sure I can get through here. Fantastic. So this riding school that we built from scratch and just absolutely loved. It was pretty special. We built a very strong community. We had a lovely barn family. We had a waiting list that wrapped around the barn twice. And we created a lot of wonderful core memories there. And it was in this riding school that I developed our learning level system, and it completely changed the trajectory of our business. Unfortunately, I did not level up my business savvy along with it. So what actually ended up happening was I created a business that everybody loved, that could not survive without my active, constant participation. I was pretty burnt out after, 14 years. And what ultimately, my mom and I ended up in this perfect storm of a situation where we both needed to take a step back, and the business folded. That there was nobody to take it over. We didn't have the structures in place to do that. And everybody mourned it for a really long time. So that's actually how I met Brian, through a webinar just like this, kind of, thinking about maybe the next business in the future and how I could avoid making that same mistake. And he has totally renewed my faith in the lesson industry. I hear so many wonderful success stories from his clients. And it's really nice to see that you can have your cake and you can eat it too. We had this wonderful system, but we needed to pair it with the solid business strategy. So hopefully you all can learn from my mistake and have both ends of it working well for you. What I would love to do here today is talk to you a little bit about our Learning Levels curriculum and why it transformed our business. And then maybe we can get into some nitty-gritty details. I am not always the best at keeping up with the chat while I'm talking. I have a squirrel brain that gets really easily derailed. So I will make sure to leave plenty of time to go back through the chat and answer questions for you guys. But for right now, I want to go ahead and take you on a little tour of our learning levels adventure. So just like our students, we're going to start with the basics and make sure we know exactly what it is we're talking about when, Brian tells you that your writing business really needs to be built around a structured curriculum. And basically what that means is we're going to take all of the skills that you probably already teach to your students if you have ever, done any instruction before, and we're going to put them in a written system that we can share, that we can document with, and we're going to break it down into logically progressive levels. And what that does for us is it gives our students little stepping stones, little achievable goals that show them the path toward what they ultimately want to achieve with horses. There are examples of learning levels systems everywhere. We see them in work, we see them in school. We do this because we as humans are not motivated 100% of the time, even when we love what we're doing. And so your students' commitment over the course of a year, 5 years, is naturally going to ebb and flow. And having the next stepping stone very visible right there in front of them with something they want on the other side of it helps them stay on the path and helps them stay invested in their lessons. I actually came across this concept very young as a swimming student in the YMCA. I was probably the worst swimmer in the state of Virginia. I was really bad. But every week I kept going back and kept spitting up water and almost drowning, trying to freestyle across the pool because the YMCA program has a level system and they give out patches. They give out really colorful, fun patches. And I had very slowly acquired almost a complete set. But there was one patch I didn't have in my age group, and I wanted it really, really bad. The interesting thing about this is that the YMCA actually 30 years later is still using these same levels. So that kind of suggests that this system works well for them. And what I think is really interesting is that if you go on the YMCA's website, you can find out, at least when I looked this up a few days ago, you can find out exactly what all of their levels are and all of the swimming skills that you need to learn to achieve each one of these levels. And I think maybe riding instructors could take a page out of that book. So I had another really impactful experience with using a documented checklist and a system of incentives with one of my very first students. I was probably like 18 at the time. So this really, really sweet but timid kid took lessons at my barn on the school horse for a little while, and then her parents took me out to meet her horse on their weekend farm. And how shall I say this? Her horse was a young, semi-feral chestnut mare. She was living in the field most of the time. It was a weekend farm for them, so she was only ridden maybe 4 times a month if things were going well. And she owns this kit. I mean, she dragged her all over the property. And Kendall loved her, but she was terrified of her and would actually pray for it to rain so she would have to come do a barn lesson with me instead. And we worked with this horse for a really, really long time, and we just weren't getting anywhere. I mean, you can see the circumstances. We're dreaded green on green here. So what ended up actually breaking her through was I started making these tiny little checklists, and the goals on them were so small at first. It would be something like walk a full circle off the lead line, turn Cayenne away from the gate. But when she could do them, we would check them off. And then when her list was completed, we would do something special. Her parents would take her on a little shopping spree at the tack shop, or I would allow her to come hang out at my barn and, be the barn rat princess for the day and get to ride her favorite school horse for free. And a few years later, this same girl is cantering this horse in big circles around their open fields. And then a few years after that, she was schooling novice level eventing and competing at Chattahoochee Hills. So it made a very strong impression for me, and showed me that this is powerful stuff. If you can meet your students where they are and you can give them achievable, tangible goals, they will keep going even when it seems like all hope is lost for them. So when I set about to create my own system, I had some particular goals for it, and we're gonna get into that in just a few minutes. But one of the biggest things that we wanted this curriculum to do for us, and it achieved that right off the bat, was we wanted it to streamline our communication with students and their parents about their progress. And I laugh about this every time I see it, but we've probably all heard that eager student who comes to ride. They've maybe taken 2 lessons, and then they ask you, "Can I canter? Can I jump?" They can barely stay on top of the horse while he walks around in a circle, but they are ready to go. And I was spending so much time as a young instructor, having to explain to people why their student was not advancing at the rate that they thought they should be advancing. So you can do some simple math. This bogs down really, really quickly. If you have, 40, 50 students and you're having to have this conversation on a regular basis with students and parents, you're going to spend a lot of unpaid time talking about their progress and maybe saying the same things over and over again. And they may not understand exactly why they are not yet cantering or jumping, because they don't know what they don't know. And when we established this leveled curriculum in our program, suddenly it wasn't personal. And they could answer that question for themselves. They could see, oh, I'm not cantering yet because cantering is in green level. And I still have to fill these 4 boxes in yellow level before I advance to green level. It's right there in front of them, all laid out. So actually people stopped asking this question and they were very easy to train too. It's quite easy to point them to my curriculum, which is plastered all over the barn wall, that is given to them at their very first lesson, that is sent to them periodically. And they could see for themselves, this is what I want to do. This is what I have to achieve first. It motivated a little bit of self-directed study as well. Something else that I noticed once we implemented this curriculum is that it actually became a little safer in my riding arena. Now, I was a young instructor, but I also had, several years of experience under my belt. I thought I was being very careful and advancing students slowly. But unless you have some kind of system to keep yourself accountable, you start teaching more than a few students, sometimes things slip through the cracks just a little bit. And what I discovered is that when I held everyone to the same standard, when I said, you all have to do XYZ, you have to be balanced at the trot without stirrups, you need to be able to direct your horse well enough to navigate this course of poles, suddenly they were not hitting massive stumbling blocks as we advanced. They were learning to canter quickly and easily with fewer falls. We were learning to jump naturally, progressively, with no incidents, because the students really were well prepared. The foundation of skill that we created in the curriculum was actually allowing them to achieve great things as they started to level up. The other big thing that we saw happen in our students is they stuck with us. And this, I think, is incredibly important for a lesson-based business. I know Brian touched on this a little bit earlier. You don't want to have a revolving door. And yeah, you're going to have, new students arrive and some old ones will leave, but you want your students to really stick with you for the long haul if possible and become committed, loyal clients that will opt in to everything else that you have to offer them. And what happened is when we launched the level, suddenly students had constantly more goals to aim for. There were even more stepping stones than they thought, beyond just being able to canter the horse or make it over a cross rail. And they could see how they needed to get there. So we started to see our students, hanging around longer and longer and longer. And ultimately, what ended up happening is when I folded my barn, when I packed up and sold off most of my horses. I told everybody, I was like, anybody who wants to take lessons with me on a freelance basis, I will be doing that. You have to do the legwork. You have to find a horse to lease. You have to find a barn that will welcome me. But I'm happy to come and continue this. And I thought, maybe I would have a few takers, but it was kind of slim pickings for good barns up here. So I thought, maybe half a dozen students if I'm lucky will keep working with me. And actually, for the next couple of years, I ended up teaching almost a full half of my original student body.
I'm done with this trip. What is wrong with this phone?
Went out of their way to find a horse to ride because they had unfinished business. They had levels that they wanted to complete, and they told me that. They said, this is why we're doing it, because we are too close to getting to this next level we've been working on, and we don't want to stop now. So I actually had, I have a student who, it's been 5 years since I closed that barn door, and he just finished his teal level a few weeks ago on a leased pony. So they will stick with you for the long haul. The levels also really help with marketing. Once you get going with them, you are going to have students that have physical awards. They have medals, they have ribbons, they have certificates, and they are going to be so happy to receive them. Those make great marketing photos and creates fear of missing out. And I think also when you start displaying the fact that you have a system, like a thoughtful, logical, well-developed system, your credibility instantly goes up a little bit. And it helps you stand out in a crowded market. If you have a whole bunch of lesson barns around you that are all promising kind of the same thing, and then you come along and you say, yes, we're going to do that, and here's how, and here are all these little built-in opportunities you're going to earn along the way because you've achieved these ribbons, you will stand apart a little bit in the crowds. So this was, when I launched this, this was actually pre-iPhone. We were out there with our caveman cameras, but it was about when Facebook started to really take off. So we had all of these happy photos of children proudly displaying their levels ribbons and leveling up, hugging their favorite school horse with the ribbon they've earned. And those pictures were getting tagged and shared far and wide. And that really helped our school to grow. That fear of missing out, it works in multiple ways. Students don't want to get left behind. And so when you're using your levels basically as the entry requirements for various things your students want to do, they're going to want to keep up with each other. So we actually had camps that we had a minimum level requirement for. And of course, if we've got some qualified students with best friends in their riding group who have not achieved that level yet, those students that have been a little left behind, they're going to be highly motivated to catch up. I've even had some schedule custom one-day camps or extra private lessons because they really wanted to ride with their friends at the summer camp, and they didn't want to get left behind by missing out on that level. And ultimately, we did end up creating extra revenue streams just through our levels program. The system, we set it up where our students could receive achievement for their levels as they were going through lessons. We wanted to be able to reward them without asking them to make any extra equipment, no strings attached. However, we did find that for students who were a little more motivated, they were willing to pay for additional opportunities to progress. So we ended up creating events we called Level Up Clinics, which were half-day clinics focused just on certain aspects of the curriculum and allowed everybody to get a little boost in their skills. And then we ended up with like 3 full big summer day camps that were basically just a larger version of that. Everybody got to focus on aspects of the curriculum that were relevant to them, and we would have a big ceremony at the end. Sometimes students would earn their ribbons and we would take pictures, and the cycle would just continue. It also made it a lot easier as our school grew and we started needing a little bit of help to keep things going in the arena, because all of our instructors were on the same page. So I taught pretty much all of the mounted lessons. My mom taught a lot of the unmounted, particularly when we were doing big events like camps. But eventually we ended up with too many groups and we needed some extra helpers in the scene. And I was really fortunate in that by the time we got to this stage of growth, I had students that had been with me a little while, were in their upper levels, and were homegrown in my system. So it made the teacher training incredibly easy because they were already familiar with the curriculum. There he goes, guys. Sorry, the microphone muted itself for a second. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. All right. So hopefully, yeah, I lost my train of thought. There's my squirrel brain right there. Right. So if we have another instructor come in who's not familiar with our system, it's really, really nice to be able to have all of the documentation and the explanation of exactly how we do things in our program so they can jump in right where someone else has left off. You know, I've been using this curriculum for long enough now that I have lesson plans. I think in our online library now that we share online, we have something like over 200 mounted lesson plans alone, just based off of the learning level system. And you can just pass that off to somebody and they can fill your shoes without you having to worry that maybe they're going to teach things a little differently, or maybe that they're going to leave out some important information that you want your students to know. Over time, this makes all of the organizational stuff behind the scene easier too. You know, initially, there was a little bit of a trial and error process trying to figure out the best way to track everybody's progress through the levels. But over time, we were developing record keeping tools, systems, and so many lesson plans. In my early years of teaching and teaching through Pony Club, I cannot tell you how many times I was up at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, the night before a camp or a clinic, frantically prepping, trying to create classy looking educational materials. You can lose a lot of sleep that way. I don't recommend it. And so over time, when we had the levels system, we were like, well, all we need to do is, you know, create things for this level's objective and create things for this level's objective. And then it kind of grew into, well, what if we made our students study guides and we gave them like little Cliff Notes versions of everything so that they could prep for lessons or review things if they wanted to. And then, you know, what if we had equitation patterns or courses that we did at every level? Wouldn't that make things nice and easy for planning? So it it kind of snowballed on itself, and now I have so many materials that I can just grab and go and pass on to somebody else who's maybe teaching a specific level. And now my scheduling is easy peasy. Alex asked what sets us apart from the Pony Club levels. I'm going to get into that in just a second because, like I mentioned, Pony Club is where I got my start. I consider myself to be Pony Club proud. I was an H grad, and we actually ran a Pony Club out of our barn for a while. And I will say too that Pony Club has definitely become a lot more inclusive in, well, the past 15 years since we started this. Things were a little bit more limiting back then. So that's kind of where my path diverged, but I will answer that question a bit more fully in a minute, Alex, because that is the big one I always get, is why reinvent the wheel. And you don't have to, but sometimes it's a good idea. So one thing that surprised me a lot about having a levels curriculum was that it actually ended up being popular with some of our adults as well as the children. Now, when I designed it, I fully expected that my adult amateur students were going to continue just doing their thing, and that this was going to be for children and, you know, the go-getters coming into my program. But what I didn't anticipate is that they would really latch on to the unmounted curriculum. So one of the things that we deliberately chose to do, and this is, you know, everybody does this a little differently, it's kind of controversial, but we actually created a separate track for unmounted education within our curriculum, which at the time was different from Pony Club. I don't think that's true anymore. But we wanted to be able to reward them separately for their unmounted achievement while still encouraging it for everybody, right? But unmounted education was so important to us. We wanted to reward every opportunity we could. So we created a separate level system for our unmounted curriculum. And our adults really, really loved that because a lot of them were amateur horse owners, maybe getting back into riding and owning a horse after many, many years. And it also allowed them to kind of keep pace with their kids. You know, if their child was leasing a horse or showing or prepping for a lesson independently, they wanted to feel like they were educated enough to actually be helpful and like ask the right questions about what their child was doing. And our unmounted curriculum gave them a easy to follow structure to ensure that they had a complete education. But we had a whole big group of probably middle-aged ladies that would get together and study that unmounted curriculum on a weekly basis with us. And ultimately, what we ended up with was exactly what we dreamed when we started the business. We had a barn with a very tight, close-knit community. Everybody was kind of on the same page with each other, that we all knew, you know, where everybody was in their levels and what goals they were aiming for. And this community spread because we had instructor friends who would collaborate, you know, with camps or clinics with us. And then their students would see our levels ribbons, our curriculum. They would talk to our students who were like, oh yeah, you know, I'm in green level, so that means I'm going to get to do XYZ this month. And then they wanted in. And they would go home and they would ask their instructors, well, why don't we get ribbons for what we do? So over time, we ended up with kind of this local pool of instructors who were all using the same system, and we were able to do things like level up camps together. And it's thanks to those instructors that I'm here today. Ultimately, they inspired me to take all of my scribbled notes, the whole system that we had put together, and create it in kind of a packaged form where I could share it with other people. So that's how the Learning Levels website was born. And in the 3 years since we have launched the Learning Levels website, it's being used by over 600 instructors that I know about in 8 different countries. And their emails suggest that this is not an isolated incident, that if you're willing to create a structure that rewards your students' progress through what you already teach within your lesson program, you too can experience all of these same benefits. So there is one more thing I want to talk about with that, but I want to check up on the chat really quick here, answer some questions. Hopefully y'all can still hear me over this storm. We're having a crazy, crazy storm today. Let's see. So how easy is what you're describing is able to monetize? So basically what we did with our curriculum is that was the only way that you could work within our lesson program for the most part. I did do a few private students, but for the most part, our business became curriculum based. And that's something I'm going to touch on in a minute too, how you can definitely decide what you like, the kind of structure that you want to have in your lesson business, and you can normalize it in a way that encourages people to pay for it as if of course they want this, right? And so what we told everybody essentially is, you know, if you join our lesson program, you are going to go through these levels. We're going to work with you. You know, we had goal setting sessions, and that was a whole part of the process. We're going to go with you to make sure you're aiming for the appropriate levels, and we'll check in periodically. But that is what we do here. And as you progress through the levels, you're going to get to do this. We had a school horse leasing program that was really hotly contested between students who love certain school horses, but they had to earn both green levels in order to do it. We had a traveling show team that hit up all the local schooling shows. Kids wanted to go show with their friend, but they had to achieve blue level to do it. So that really motivated them to invest further into their lesson program. So Joanna asked if we had a separate module for showing, and that is a great question. So in our business, we deliberately left the show preparation out of the regular curriculum. I mean, we touched on it here and there, right? But we very deliberately did not make it part of the everyday curriculum that we were using with our students, because we didn't have a lot of, I mean, we had a relatively small school horse herd. We had a 2-horse trailer for most of this. We were located in a very rural area, not a lot of good showing options nearby. It was definitely a big expensive commitment. You were going to take a whole weekend away anytime you wanted to go do something bigger. And also at the time we launched, we I say this, and yet people will still pay for what they really love, right? But we were in the second poorest county in the state of Georgia, heading into a recession, and in a very rural backwoods area. So competition wasn't on the radar for a lot of people. Like, they weren't actually even that interested in getting into big time horse showing. So we actually did a separate event to prepare our students for competition, and we made it mandatory. They had to complete this event, and they had to have their levels requirements taken care of before they were allowed to compete. Let's see. So Kristen asks if you guys can reference our program levels and lesson plan. So I'm going to drop a whole bunch of links in the chat here in just a bit. The answer is yes. Actually, I'll go ahead and give you guys the levels curriculum now, because it is free. Our basic checklist, we have an English and Western curriculum that includes both the mounted and the unmounted levels tracks. And then we also have a ground training curriculum, which I'm going to talk about a bit more in a second. But we chose to make that curriculum free for everyone, all because, you know, we spent so much time sort of desperately trying to find resources when we were getting started, and we wanted to make them really easy for everyone to access. So I'm going to drop that in the chat here. There you go. And I have a little bit more I'll share with you. So our lesson plans are also on the same website. We actually have a lot of materials. We're still building out our Western stuff because we added that curriculum a little later, and I don't have a lot of like really good images or correct terminology in my lesson plan. So I am very slowly building that out. The English one is close to complete. There you go. It's really great stuff in the chat here, everybody. Super. So I'm gonna keep going here for a moment, and then I will come back to your questions. We got a lot going on in the chat. I love it. Abigail says she's just started using the levels, but everyone loves how organized they are. That's wonderful. Taba asks, how far did we take it? We were very much a foundation-based barn. So we went, and we were kind of eventing based, like that was my thing. And I'm going to just hop to the next couple of slides here. But we basically took our students up through like novice level, jumping 3 foot, which for most students was about enough commitment for them. He asks how to implement something like this, loves the content, but is overwhelmed by the prospect of stepping into it. Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. All right, great questions, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my slides. I have a few more points I want to just touch on really quick. I think we'll answer some of the questions here in the chat. So let me figure out which tab I had. Here we go. Okay, hopefully we're back at it here. So what I want to reassure everybody who is contemplating setting up a levels curriculum in your barn, you want to experience all the same benefits too, but maybe have a little decision paralysis about it, right? Because it's a lot of work, a lot of decision making. What I want to reassure you is that you don't have to get it right away. You just have to start. Even if you have an established lesson program and you're a little worried about what your students will think, just dive in there and they will give you all the feedback that you need. And ultimately, like, consider what you're trying to achieve with your business. What are your big picture overarching goals with it? And how can your curriculum help you attract the kind of clients that are also going to be interested in that same big picture? When we launched our learning levels, I had already been teaching for several years. We had some students who were already intermediate riders, already going to a few little schooling shows, jumping cross country. We really didn't know what to expect. They were enthusiastically all in. They were like, "Oh, cool! So you're gonna reward us for what we were already doing? This is amazing!" And then once we displayed all the ribbons on the walls, we had what I always considered to be the Pokemon effect. They wanted them all, right? And we've changed some things. We've made some minor revisions. We've made some major changes. So in the beginning, I started with 2 tracks, 7 levels. Basically, everybody starts here. Then we have beginner skills through green level. We have kind of advanced beginner, early intermediate in blue and orange. And then for our very serious committed students, jumping 2, 6, 3 foot, doing a little bit more dressage, we have these higher 2 levels. Now, what we realized after a while is that we were actually not reaching one of our fastest growing sources of revenue, which was tiny tots. I had discovered that I loved working with tiny children. Like, it just brings me so much joy. It's something I was naturally good at. And there was a huge influx of, 4, 5, 6-year-old students because they had nowhere else to go. No other barns were taking them. So we ended up creating a separate level, rainbow level, which was designed specifically for younger children. They didn't have to read. They didn't have to do anything independently. They could do it all, on a lead line with an assistant. And we established this so that all of our younger children could start there. And then when they got a little bit older, they'd have their rainbow ribbon and they could move up to red level. Now, what actually ended up happening is we had a mutiny and our older students were like, "We want pretty rainbow ribbons too." So we had to create a system where they could earn them. And I know a lot of programs now that actually use rainbow level as the starting point. Even though the study guide is a coloring book, I have several photos of like 50, 60-year-old men proudly showing off their rainbow ribbons from all over the country because it was just a nice, easy starting point for them. So we were able to use our curriculum and kind of course correct a little bit to make sure that we were providing an incentive for a really big target market. More recently, I created 3 additional levels. It was kind of a passion project for me, but it also solved some problems that I had run into in the lesson business. So I had noticed that a lot of students, particularly now that I'm freelancing and working with backyard horse owners, maybe had been well educated in how to ride. If they were very lucky, they had gotten good unmounted education on caring for the horse, but they did not actually know very much about training a horse or working with it on the ground, or even having any kind of like positive relationship with this horse when they were not in the saddle. And this is something that I had been observing for a very long time. It was like kind of trying to figure out how to address it within my lessons. And then personally kind of ran up against this wall again when my hardworking, beautiful, wonderful veteran school horse that I had kept, the one I kept after we closed up shop, went totally lame. Like, he's in his 20s now and his arthritis is to a point where he cannot work. And I felt like, I'd rehomed plenty of retired horses in the past, been soured on the experience a couple of times, but also knew, financially, bottom line is this horse has to earn his keep. And these horse-centered levels allow him to do that. My quote unquote broken horse that I cannot sell even if I wanted to at this point. He earns his keep teaching these horse-centered ground training lessons. So there's a lot of learning theory in them. It's a lot of equine psychology. We teach them, very basics of operant conditioning. They learn about positive reinforcement, pressure and release. They learn how to do groundwork. We focus on communicating with the horse, developing relationship from the ground. And it kind of helps the lesson horses keep from getting burnt out too. What I found beautiful about these horse-centered levels is that they appealed to kind of a wide demographic of people that wanted to interact with horses, but maybe did not want to ride or were not able to ride because of physical limitation or fear. And it allowed me to leverage my time a little bit better. You can teach ground training lessons indoors if you have with a single horse under a little shed roof or in a barn aisle, to a fairly large group. So again, if we start doing our math in our head, our regular riding lessons, we know we're spending quite a lot of money, as Brian has already pointed out, keeping those horses fit and keeping them ready to go for lessons. And then we can still only get, maybe 6 tops in the arena before things get a little sketchy in there. Whereas with our ground training lessons and our unmounted horse care lessons, we can develop quite a large leverage program. The horses don't have to do much more than walk, maybe trot around a little bit on the lead line. And there's really quite a lot we can do. I have an adult group that has been meeting every week for 2 years now, working on these horse-centered lessons, and they are so gung-ho. They, 2 weeks every year, they don't even ride, and they love it. And this helps me, achieve my ideal of developing really super well-rounded horse people who are the complete package, who honor the horse and understand the horse and can care for the horse and aren't just using the horse for sporting equipment. Now, we did have the question earlier about why I went to all this trouble and why I felt the need to develop the system myself. And the answer is you don't have to do this. There are many established curriculums out there that are already excellent, and several organizations that are based off of levels curriculums. 4-H, CHA, and Pony Club being foremost. And my experience was we did run a club for a while. I did it simultaneously alongside lesson learns. And it just was too much commitment up front for the vast majority of the students that I was pulling in. Whereas if I could entice them into kind of a lower entry point, like, hey, come do this introductory red level course for 8 weeks, or hey, come sign up for a semester of lessons and you'll earn this ribbon at the end of it, no strings attached, nothing else you have to do. That would get them in the door, and then they would be more likely to want to explore things like Pony Club or competition or leasing a horse or buying a horse. But it was just too much of a time commitment for most of these families to really get enough out of the Pony Club to justify the membership fees and the weekends that they were putting into it. So ultimately, our club ended up folding. Again, this is a familiar story where just nobody would take over, and they have a requirement that you can only be DC for 3 years to keep you from getting burnt out, or they did at the time, and nobody would take over. So we were like, okay, we need something that we can do pretty easily, that's low commitment, that we can just integrate with our lesson program, that's a bit more flexible for us. I really wanted to be able to address those younger kids. I wanted to be able to explore a little bit more kind of off the beaten path. And at the time, Pony Club was only English, and if you didn't love to jump, you weren't getting past D2. Now that's different now. You can actually progress in different pathways through Pony Club, and they have multiple disciplines, but at the time you could not. And so we were like, we want to be a bit more inclusive here and really address our target audience. And what I discovered from doing this is that the process of creating a curriculum or taking somebody else's curriculum and making little tweaks to make it fit you, however you do it, it's really, really valuable because it forces you to address kind of your big picture goals. So just as an example, the learning levels, they had to accomplish certain things, right? So the biggest thing for me was that they had to prioritize unmounted learning. Now, Brian talked about this earlier too. I am so passionate about this. I wrote an entire book about it. And actually, coming out December 1st, the big book of barn lessons, my pride and joy will be published on Amazon. And in a minute, I'll share a link to sign up for our e-newsletter so you can get notified the minute that it goes live if you're interested in that. So I created kind of a manifesto on how to create a thriving unmounted program that your students love. There's a lot of testing and trial and error that went into this. And there's about 200 pages of unmounted lesson activities in there, plus some sample lesson plans, some short course formats, like a whole lot of revenue boosting ideas. It's called the Big Book of Barn Lessons. And you won't find it on Amazon yet because it's not released yet, but it will be there really soon. They didn't give me a pre-order link because I guess when you're new to independent publishing, you don't get one of those. But December 1st, I will drop a link in the chat in a bit and share that with you guys so you can get notified if you are interested in learning more about it in a week or two. But yeah, so I wanted to really emphasize unmounted horsemanship. That was incredibly important to my value system.
Yeah.
We got somebody who needs to
I
be
catch
muted
that stuff
here.
real quick when it's antique.
See if I can find it out. All right, we're set. We got it. Bring my chat back up so I don't lose you guys. So I wanted to emphasize my value, which was that our horses are living, breathing, complicated animals, and that we can't just use them like we would, a tennis racket and then stick them in the closet at the end of our hour-long lesson and forget about it. I wanted clients who were really interested in learning and seeing the whole big picture of horsemanship. So the levels had to establish that unmounted learning is valuable. So we had minimum requirements for pretty much everything that our students had to do. Oh, you want to come hang out during the working student day on Saturday? You need to be at least a yellow level. You want to lease a horse in our program? You need to have your green level ribbon. You want to go off property to a show with one of our beloved school horses? You had better have a blue horse sense ribbon so that we know that you're going to care for that horse responsibly at the show. And creating this outward-facing unmounted curriculum emphasized to our parents as well as our students that there was a lot to learn about horses and that they didn't even know what they didn't know. There was so much to it. So over time, actually, I didn't have an indoor arena my entire run with that barn. I never had one. But over time, I actually had everybody trained to come for rainy day lessons for the most part. Like pretty much all my active learning level students would just automatically show up because they knew there was more to it than riding. And they understood that it was important and that it could be fun and that they were going to receive achievement rewards for their unmounted learning. So that was a really, really huge thing for our curriculum. That was the part of Pony Club we didn't want to give up. It was so, so valuable. The other things that we wanted to do is we wanted to prioritize safety. This is something that I actually didn't get in Pony Club. Nobody ever taught me, and I rode with wonderful instructors my whole youth career. Nobody ever taught me how to stop a runaway horse or what to do if the horse bucked or what to do if your saddle slipped. I got to figure all that out after it happened, and had to ride through some kind of gnarly situations as a child. And I thought, hey, could we prevent that from happening? Could we make that a little safer? So actually a big foundation of our learning levels curriculum is what we call survival skills. We teach our students very strong defensive possession. We teach them emergency stops and kind of the pros and cons in each. We teach them when you should and shouldn't use an emergency dismount, and they practice all of these until they can do them in their sleep. So when something goes wrong, they're, instead of them just instinctively going into the fetal position and then screaming and falling off, they have the toolkit that they need to actually deal with the situation. And seeing that work is tremendously rewarding when your small child leans back and rides out the buck that nobody saw coming. That's a really good feeling, and it helps bring your liability down a little bit when you have documented safety training. You can go to your insurance agent and say, yes, they were taught how to do this, and this is, I have documentation of, like, here's all of the days that they showed this skill. But it's not super commonly taught. I think people sometimes are afraid of, opening the can of worms that you can create by teaching something a little sketchy, like an emergency dismount or a pulley rein, so they just don't go there. We chose to make it part of our program because we felt ultimately anything we can do to make our students a little safer. We have a lot of little children, 1,000-pound animals out there. We're going to do it. We also really wanted our students to be very well-rounded. We kind of told them, while you're with us, you're going to be jack of all trades, and then you can decide where you want to go be a master. But we wanted them to learn a basic balance position they could apply to any style of riding. We wanted to expose them to a lot of different activities and riding disciplines. And through our unmounted curriculum, we wanted them to learn about things outside their bubble too. We wanted them to learn about different breeds, tack, training practices, etc. And we wanted it to make our life easier. If you're doing this, but it's a headache and you dread all of the paperwork, or you just feel like you can't stay on top of it, what's the point? So we wanted it to simplify our lesson planning, and we wanted it to make things easier for everybody who taught within our program. And we have a little additional goals too. We really, really wanted to use colors. That was incredibly important to us because, all people like colors. How many matchy saddle pad sets are out there in the world right now? And when we explained it to people, they were instantly like, oh yeah, like karate. That made sense to them intuitively. We wanted to make sure that we could kind of, flexibly check people out, let them progress at their own rate. We wanted to make sure we were only addressing skills that we were really confident in teaching. And of course, we wanted them to be very soundly progressive. We wanted to make sure that we were giving our students a strong foundation for everything they attempted in future levels. So if you decide to take this on, a really good starting place is just to set aside 15 minutes and map out, what are your program goals? What are you trying to achieve with your curriculum? How do you want it to make your life easier? What communication do you want it to do for you? And how do you want it to inspire your students to continue moving through your program? This is a really good opportunity to kind of, again, think about that ideal client and figure out how you can best serve them, but also how you can best serve yourself by attracting people with similar values to you. Having a documented curriculum will allow you to do that. It basically says, this is who I am, this is what I teach, who's in. And you will find that you will meet your tribe and have students that stick with you for the long haul, who might still be with you after you've officially been out of business for 5 years, earning their teal level ribbon just to catch them all. So I really hope that was helpful for you guys. I'm going to go through the chat really quick, and I'm going to drop a couple links here. Let me stop my screen sharing. So I'm going to give you guys all these slides so you can go through them. Let me just read my chat comments here, because again, my multitasking ability is not great. Thank you guys. Yeah, ribbons do work. Marianne pointed out that they're powerful. We hung our levels ribbons at the very, very front of the barn, so they were the first thing that people saw when they walked in the doors. Kimber says safety is everything. Yep. Oh, wonderful, guys. Thank you. Chris asked about insurance needs for instructors. So I'm no expert, but I will tell you the best thing for you to do is to find an equine insurance agent, talk to them about your needs, and then shop around a little bit. So for example, right now, I teach most my lessons kind of here and there and everywhere. So I have a traveling instruction policy that just follows me to whatever premises I'm teaching out of. And I got that through Blue Bridle. I was super, super pleased with them. They've been great to work with. But yes, you definitely want to reach out to an equine insurance agent because everybody's situation is going to be a little different. And it's not inexpensive, but it is incredibly important. Liability is crazy out there, guys. We have a question about the survival skills, like riding a buck. So I actually developed some techniques. I have what I call a safety seat, which is essentially a very strong defensive position. And I have some tips and tricks for teaching that to students. So when they get frightened, their immediate instinct is to think heels down, shoulders back, tailbone tucked, belly breath, rather than lean forward and clutch the mane. All right, so let me grab some links for you guys here. This is wonderful. Thank you all for your kind comments. I'm really hope this was helpful. Maybe gave you some ideas. I can talk curriculum with people for hours, and as many of Brian's clients know. So I'm going to drop 2 links here in the chat. The first one I am going to do is the link to our newsletter, and I am going to just encourage you guys, if you want information about our program, if you want to be the first to find out when we launch the Big Book of Barn Lessons, December 1st, and if you're maybe interested in setting up a curriculum in 2024, that you would like some handholding and you'd like somebody else to do all the busy work, we are going to be taking on a few customization clients in the new year. This is something I've been working on behind the scenes. I'm really excited to expand it. But yeah, Amy, I hope you check out the book, because the hard part is getting people excited about unmounted lessons. I actually have a blog about that I can share too real quick before we wrap up, but let me drop you guys some links. I'm going to give you the slides too. Alrighty, so here is the link to sign up for our newsletter. And let me hop on Google real quick and get you these slides. Got a lot of tabs open, so I'm gonna make sure I'm clicking on the right one here. All right, it says my link is copied, so here is a link to the slides. I'll also pass them on to Brian too, so if anybody misses this, you can distribute them. And then last but not least, just because it's come up a couple times, I will drop a link to a blog post that we put up fairly recently, specifically about unmounted lesson programs and why they succeed or don't succeed. So it sounds like some of y'all might find that a little bit helpful too. But feel free to browse around our website. So we do keep a lot of the full fleshed out lesson plans, the unmounted teaching guides, the worksheets, flashcards, etc. We do keep them behind a very inexpensive membership wall, just because it takes money to keep a website that size running. There's a lot of files on there now. And right now we have everything just in a large library that you can filter your search. So if you want to find all the beginner stuff, you can just search for the red level things. You can find just the unmounted horse sense or just the horse centered ground training. You can filter it by topic. We're going to work in the future to create like some bundled download sets for folks too, so it's a little bit easier to just get in and get out. But yeah, feel free to download our curriculum checklist, use them as a starting point. We give you our blessing to adapt our work and run with it. Just, you know, don't just copy the PDF and sell it to somebody else. But within your program, you are welcome to use our levels as a starting point. And again, if you want the supplementary materials, we have a pretty inexpensive membership on the website. And we'll keep you updated on all the new resources. You know, our goal is to make your lives easier. And certainly we want to see you succeed. That's why we're here. Well, thank you guys. Got some wonderful, wonderful comments. I'm just going to check the chat one more time before we wrap up. Here's a great question. Someone asked if, oh my goodness, I scrolled too fast. Hazra asked, if you were to do it over again, what would you do to not be able to delegate and not burn out? Short answer to that is basically listen to everything Brian tells you. You're going to think you can do it all yourself, and you can't do it all yourself, no matter how much you love it. So you really want to create a business structure with a team that allows you to delegate, and then you can teach as much as you like. You know, I got into this because I absolutely love that one-on-one dynamic of working with a horse and a rider. I love figuring out fun new ways to teach horsemanship skills that I want to pass on to the next generation. I think that instructors of beginner riders and riding schools are the future of the horse industry. As land keeps disappearing, as expenses continue to rise, there might come a point where we are the ones who are left. We are the gateway, right? So I definitely want to help raise the standard for horsemanship in whatever way I can. But you can't do it all. So create a strong, sustainable business structure that will be there, and it's got your back when you can't be the one out there teaching the lessons or taking care of the horses. All right, everybody, as Meg has reminded me, we're about out of time here. Thank you everyone so much. It was wonderful meeting you all. And yeah, give us a follow at Horse Sense Levels on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, kind of all over the place. Sign up for the newsletter, and look forward to talking to all of you soon.